Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. We made it through another day. We are still alive. We are still kicking. We are still here. We're a survivor. We're surviving. I'm a survivor. You're a survivor. We're surviving together. We're staying alive. Ha, ha, ha. Staying alive. Yeah, they demonetized us. They kicked us when we were down. They took away 2 of our channels. But we're still here. And firing on all cylinders tonight. At least all the cylinders we have left, which is a good thing. We're just impoverished. That's okay. The CBC is not. Oh, no, they get well over $1 billion a year from the Canadian government. And then when Elon Musk correctly labeled them government-funded media, they threw a hissy fit. So they've changed that label. We'll talk about that. And a lot of the stories that we have to talk about tonight tie into each other. Sometimes just indirectly, and sometimes because they're raising ethical issues and other issues that just dovetail from one story to the next. So it's going to make for an interesting commentary, I think, tonight, as I ad-lib my way through all of this. Justin Trudeau on the hot seat because of his Jamaican vacation. Oh, and he goes on vacation. He goes in style. And it seems he goes at the taxpayers' expense. The opposition parties, they're trying to hold him accountable. And even the media. All of the mainstream media, which is on the take from the government these days. Yeah, even they're chiming in. The Teflon seems to be wearing off just a little bit. Trudeau's Teflon, his shield, his insulation against criticism, seems to be wearing just a bit thin. Later in the broadcast, journalist John Mark Dougan will join us from Russia. He's been on this program before. As you may recall, if you saw him when he was on here the last couple of times, he is from the United States. He's a former police officer. He has an incredible story. His own story is amazing. He was sort of blowing the whistle on some police officers. He had information that he wasn't really supposed to release, and I hope I'm getting his story right if I recall it correctly. Anyway, he took a plane, flew north, got into Canada, managed to escape and make his way into Russia, where today he still lives and works as a journalist now. We're going to talk to John Mark Dougan about a wide variety of stories, the war in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court, the economy, the leaked Pentagon documents, the state of fighting in Ukraine right now. We've got a whole range of things, and we're also going to talk about that Wall Street Journal journalist who is back in a Russian court today. And that court, as you may have heard, is upholding the sentence that has been passed against him, or the decision to detain him. So we'll discuss that, and that is going to open up a whole commentary that will relate also to the CBC story, what's going on Twitter, what's happening with those leaked Pentagon documents and what's happening in Russia. Dominion voting machines and Fox News, they have a deal. And I'll tell you, this one, I'm wrestling with this one too. This one boggles my mind. A man who said he identifies as a woman ends up in a woman's homeless shelter, and now police are searching for this person. Is it a man? I don't know what this person's pronouns are or might be, but now this person is wanted for sexual assault. That's a Windsor story. We'll talk about that as well. And if that doesn't open up or poke a hornet's nest, I don't know what will, but that's what we have on tap tonight. So don't go away. I'll start queuing the material up, and we'll start talking about it when we come back.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I am back, and we're going to start tonight in Canada with the Justin Trudeau vacation story. It's a hot one. It certainly is a hot story tonight. 4 times, opposition leader Pierre Poilievre asked the Prime Minister about his expenses when on vacation with wealthy friends who donated to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. And Trudeau really did not answer the questions. Trudeau and his family spent the holiday season at a luxurious estate in Jamaica. And this estate belongs to a wealthy family. And 2 years ago, they did make a large donation to the Trudeau Foundation. This revelation coming from Radio-Canada. Given the relationship between the Trudeaus and Peter Green's family, the trip was cleared by the ethics commissioner before Trudeau went with his family down to Jamaica. And Trudeau apparently has had a relationship with Peter Green since the 1970s. So Green owns the Prospect Estate with 5 stunning villas on the edge of the Caribbean Sea. Neither the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner nor the Prime Minister's office will state, or has stated, or has been willing to state whether they were aware that the Green family is donor to the Trudeau Foundation when they evaluated the trip. So this was an issue that put Trudeau on the hot seat in the House of Commons today during question period. To rent a room at this, what do you call it, a villa? This estate? I guess it's worth about like $9,000 a night for the well-heeled who are able to find enough pocket change to wing on down there to Jamaica and partake in such accommodations. This is a trip that apparently cost taxpayers somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000 to $162,000. This, according to documents tabled in the House of Commons. And those expenses include more than $115,000 in costs incurred by the RCMP to ensure the safety of the Prime Minister and his family, security. So obviously the opposition parties want more information. They smell blood in the water. And this is, again, something that is, I think, eroding Trudeau's popularity even further. He is damaged goods just a little bit now. It's amazing how resilient he has been. It's amazing to me how he has been able to be so authoritarian, so heavy-handed with the people during his reign, and still managed to get himself reelected. But now, well, as I say, Trudeau's Teflon seems to be wearing off just a little bit. Trudeau's travels have made headlines before, since he came to power in 2015. He did stay at the Aga Khan's Island in 2016, and that resulted in a reprimand from the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. And that trip cost taxpayers at least $270,000. Trudeau also apologized back in 2021 for staying at a seaside residence in Tofino, BC. He started that vacation during the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which the Liberals, under his watch, established. But on that day, as I recall, he went windsurfing. And then, just recently, he was criticized for renting a luxury suite at great expense when he went to Queen Elizabeth's funeral in London. That cost taxpayers $6,000 a night for that hotel room. That's also where he went downstairs to the piano bar and sang, what was the song? It was a Queen song. I'll let you remember. That was controversial as well. It didn't look good. Bad optics, bad form. You can see a pattern here, can't you? Spoiled little rich boy. And this is me editorializing. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, entitled Privileged? Oh, yes. You want to talk about privilege? This is a young man who has been allowed to make gross mistakes, even as an adult, and get away with it. Blackface, how many times? And I have to say, I'm just appalled at the contempt that I'm witnessing here, the contempt that he has for average Canadians, for taxpayers, the way the money is thrown around. Now, I know that if you're the president of the United States, there's a massive cost just for any president to travel. Just look what happened, even a past president. Look what happened when Trump went to New York to turn himself in response to the indictment. You know, he gets he has a whole motorcade and the Secret Service with him, and it costs a lot of money to keep a president or a former president safe. It's a little bit different, though. It's just sort of on a slightly different scale. Now, I will say that if there is a politician in Canada and maybe in the world who does need protection right now, it would be Justin Trudeau, because he is downright unpopular. No question about that. But here's the exchange now between Poilievre and Trudeau today in the House of Commons over the Jamaican vacation.
Celebrate our heritage as a time of joy, the start of a vibrant harvest season, and the founding of the Khalsa Panth in 1699 by Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a home to one of the largest Sikh populations
Coming right up,
globally,
folks. Pierre
and there are
Poilievre
many organizations who are working hard
will
to
be
help
first
the
up
community,
for question
like Save Food
period.
Bank, Khalsa Aid Canada, and many others.
He's in a grill.
Last week, I
Yeah, but you're going to find Trudeau
Novel Technologies founder Dara Singh Nagra
dodges
$1
and
million
weaves and
to
weaves
the
and
Sikh Kids
dodges.
Foundation. There are true.
Hang on a second here. And here we go.
Questions, question.
So no one's shown that.
A poll has stated that 2/3 of Canadians have to reduce their summer vacation plans, and even more have to, or rather others, eliminate them completely because of this Prime Minister's inflation. We learned today that not only has he asked taxpayers to pay $160 million for his holidays, but he received a holiday in a luxury villa from a donor for the Trudeau Foundation. Did the Prime Minister pay for his own lodgings at this villa? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, like the Leader of the Opposition knows full well, we have been friends with this family over the past 50 years, and we've already worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that rules are followed. If the Leader of the Opposition was really preoccupied by the cost of living for Canadians, he would be in support of our budget that is here to deliver more money for Canadians during these difficult times. With a groceries reduction that we have asked this House to accelerate with direct help also with dental care, and the Conservatives have voted against. We will be here to deliver for Canadians.
Le chef de l'opposition.
Because of the galloping inflation this Prime Minister has caused, 2/3 of Canadians say they are cutting back on summer vacations, and 1/4 say they've canceled their vacations altogether, but they'll still have to pay for someone else's vacation. $160,000 of taxpayer expenses for the Prime Minister to go down to the private villa, luxurious villa of a super rich Trudeau Foundation donor, for which the nightly cost is as much as $9,000. How much did the Prime Minister pay for his accommodations at this luxurious villa?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our family have been good friends with this family for about 50 years. And as always, we work with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that all rules are followed. But if Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, was truly concerned about affordability for Canadians, he would be voting to support our budget that puts forward concrete measures to help Canadians from coast to coast to coast. He'd be fast-tracking the grocery rebate through this House to make sure that we can deliver as quickly as possible help to 11 million Canadians. And he wouldn't have stood to vote against the dental care supports that already help about 250,000 young people right across this country.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is a villa that rents out commercially for as much as $9,000 per night. If any other Canadian had stayed there, That's what they would have to have paid, and they would have to pay for their own airfare, not having a private jet. This prime minister wants us to believe that these Trudeau Foundation donors offered him $9,000 a night vacation for nothing. We know nothing is free, Mr. Speaker. This is about influence and power for the super rich. So why won't he answer? How much should he pay in accommodation per night at this luxurious villa?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I guess, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition struggles with the concept of friendship, Mr. Speaker. My father was godfather to one of their kids. Their father was godfather to one of my brothers. This is 50 years of friendship, Mr. Speaker. But of course, we worked with the ethics commissioners to make sure everything, all the rules were followed. But if the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about friendships, let's talk about the fact that he's running to his American billionaire tech giant friends to attack the local news that Canadians are relying on. Shame on him for going after Canadian content, Canadian news, Canadian things that people care about.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The only thing Canadian about the Prime Minister's vacation is the tax dollars forced to pay for it, Mr. Speaker. But he refuses to answer the question. He knows that there's these powerful interests are buying influence while making the Prime Minister more out of touch with the people on whom he is imposing his inflationary taxes and deficits. This is consistent with having already been found guilty for taking a $250,000 vacation from a billionaire that was seeking a government grant from him. If he's got nothing to hide, will he tell us, did he take these $9,000 a night villas for free?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition knows well, there are certain security protocols that the RCMP need to follow for all prime ministers, regardless of political parties or partisan stripes. But again, Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition was genuinely cared about affordability for Canadians, he would be voting in favor of our dental benefits that are helping hundreds of thousands of kids right now and will help millions of Canadians into the future. But he voted
Dental
against
care.
He voted against tax cuts for the middle class.
Did you
while
take
we
a
raised
free
them on the
gift? That's
wealthiest
the
1%.
question.
And now he's running to his American billionaire buddies to go after local news for Canadians. That's not what Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this from a guy who took a $160,000 taxpayer-funded trip to a private villa for which there was no security reason that he couldn't pay for his own room. He took a $6,000 a night vacation in London, 2 weeks in Costa Rica in the middle of the summer, surfing into Fino on Truth and Reconciliation Day at taxpayers' expense, and a guilty verdict for staying at Billionaire Island. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is out of touch and Canadians are out of money. When will he stop with these vacations and start working for the people in this country?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservative leader cared as much about Canadians as he does about partisan attacks, he would actually be stepping up to support our delivery of direct benefits to Canadians. He continues to stand against the child care agreements that are down to $10 a day in 6 provinces and territories across the country, and saving already Canadians right across the country hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single month. He'd be standing in favor of the dental care supports that we're sending to hundreds of thousands of kids instead of continuing to vote against them. He'd be accelerating the delivery of the grocery rebate to help 11 million Canadians.
L'honorable député de Bel-
Didn't answer the
The
question.
honourable member for Bailleau-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, friendship is great in Quebec. It is said that a friend is a friend. I won't be asking questions that won't get an answer from the Prime Minister. I'm sure that he knows that the Green family funded the Trudeau Foundation before he went there on holiday. So let's go to the next point. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians and Quebecers how much are worth where he stayed, how much is worth where he stayed, and whether or not he paid out of pocket for this stay? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our families have been friends for 50 years. And when one has a friend, one often goes to visit them. And what we do ourselves, in our case, is to go through the Ethics Commissioner to see that all rules are followed. That's what we do every single time, and that's what Canadians expect of us. The Honourable Member for Belleville-Chambly. The Ethics Commissioner should have been told that the Trudeau Foundation would also often receive money. Another subject. The Chinese government wants to give $1 million to the University of Montreal, not for friendship, but they go through an intermediary instead of protecting the most important university foundation in Quebec. The Trudeau Foundation is receiving $200,000 and is asking from the Prime Minister, well, does the Prime Minister admit that he is not part of any decision made when it comes to Chinese interference? Will he turn to this House to take action? Mr. Speaker, as I said, for 10 years, I've had no direct work done with the foundation that has my father's name.
Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadian families and workers have been hard hit by the inflation. But you know who's not hard hit by the inflation? CEOs. CEOs have made record salaries. In fact, the average CEO in our country makes 241 times more than the average employee. 241 times more. This is outrageous, and Canadians are frustrated by it, and they have the right to be. So will the Prime Minister realize that life is not all sun and beaches, and that we need to support our initiative to make sure we can raise the salary of workers and tackle this inequality?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have been and will continue to remain committed to making sure everyone pays their fair share of taxes. We know the cost of living continues to be a real concern of Canadians, even with inflation coming down. With more good news today, we know that groceries remain too high. That's why we're moving forward with the grocery rebate for 11 million Canadians in a targeted way that will not contribute to inflation. And that's why we're hoping that all members in this House accelerate this grocery rebate so we can deliver it to Canadians who need it as quickly as possible.
That's right. Well, member for Burnaby South.
Clearly, the Liberals are disconnected with people's reality. Our idea is simple. If a company like Loblaws can pay its CEO, Galen Weston, 431 times the salary of its employees, Loblaws can afford to do a little more to help our society. If the company wants to pay less tax, then they can increase salaries. Will the Prime Minister support our initiative to increase people's and workers' salaries? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, one of the first things we did was to reduce taxes for the middle class and increasing taxes for the richest 1%. We've continued to deliver measures that help those who need it by making sure that benefit checks are not being sent to millionaire families. We'll continue to be here to help people, also through the grocery rebate, and we ask everyone throughout this House to contribute in the acceleration of the delivery of these benefits through the approval of our budget, and I hope that all parliamentarians will work so that Canadians who need it receive this rebate as quickly as possible.
For Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Canadians got sky-high heating, grocery, rent, and mortgage bills this holiday season.
Okay, they're going to put him back
Well,
on the hot
sky
seat.
high in a private jet to another rich liberal crony's private estate in the Caribbean on taxpayer dime.
Here he comes.
Who happens to be a massive Trudeau Foundation donor. This out-of-touch trust fund Prime Minister doesn't understand or feel the pain that his inflation caused as 1.5 million Canadians go into a food bank in a single month. Will the Prime Minister stand up today and apologize for using taxpayers' money to vacation at a Trudeau Foundation donor's estate?
Hear, hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
On the point of poverty, Mr. Speaker, when that party was in power, there were 2.7 million more people who were in poverty than there are today. That include 800,000 children. But, Mr. Speaker, I would ask the party opposite if they believe, because if a prime minister is to travel, there has to be security. So is their position either that there should be no security for a prime minister who travels on vacation with his family, or is their position that a prime minister should never take a vacation with his family?
Honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
He could have paid for his own vacation. I guess the Prime Minister went on vacation so Canadians wouldn't have to. And as Canadians pay $2,200 a month for rent, this Prime Minister stays in lavish $6,000 a night hotel rooms. 1 in 5 Canadians are skipping meals. He gets to charge $55,000 for groceries. 62% of Canadians have to scale back on vacations, while this Prime Minister charges Canadians to vacation on a huge Trudeau Foundation donor's estate. Just a simple question. Which high-priced Liberal consultant gave this stupid advice, or was this another one of the Prime Minister's tone-deaf decisions?
Oops. Gonna get a wrist slap for that one.
I just want to point out that maybe be judicious on the language that is being used in the chamber on both sides, whether you're asking the question or answering it. Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member across is well aware, this government has taken a series of measures to help those that are dealing with the global impact of inflation, and the party opposite has voted against every single one of those measures and continues to oppose measures like the important grocery rebate that we put forward. Mr. Speaker, however, I would say to the party opposite, I get that they don't like the Prime Minister. I get that they have personal animosity and partisan attacks that they want to level against him. But I would ask them again, do they believe a Prime Minister should not be able to at Christmas with his family travel, or do they believe that he should not have security when he does so?
Well, member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, all we're saying is that he should pay for his own vacations and not stick the bill to taxpayers. While Canadians were experiencing the chaos that his mismanagement of the airport system caused, the Prime Minister got to skip the queues and jet down on yet another Caribbean vacation. You see, the Prime Minister never has to pay for the terrible policies that his decisions make. Other Canadians have to pay for the higher costs of fuel that they put in their cars. He doesn't. He also doesn't have to pay for his own home heating fuel. And now we're finding out that he doesn't even pay for his own vacation. Treasury Board guidelines say he should reimburse at least the commercial cost. Did he?
The Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can absolutely confirm that he did cover that cost, and I can also confirm to the member across that yes, absolutely. And I would ask him to step away from the idea of attacking this Prime Minister and from his partisanship, and ask about a future Prime Minister, and ask if that future Prime Minister would be afforded the opportunity to take a vacation with his family. And if he believes that that is the case, does he believe that Prime Minister should be afforded security? And if he does believe that, which is the vast preponderance of these costs, then certainly he would see that the actions taken were reasonable.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the Government House Leader is going to answer specific questions, the Prime Minister dodged this question 5 times. Now, the Government House Leader just answered that, yes, he does pay. But the specific question is, did the Prime Minister reimburse or pay for the commercial value of the accommodations? The accommodations for this luxury villa runs as high as $9,000 per night. Specific question, did the Prime Minister pay for it?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister taking a vacation with his family over Christmas with his friends is a preoccupation.
Either way, Trudeau's in trouble.
Not to call each other names.
A little bit.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is clear in the question and in the way those questions are posed that the interest of the party opposite is a partisan interest. It is an interest to attack. It is an interest to advance their partisan advantage. I would ask them at this moment, when we're dealing with the series of issues that we're dealing in this planet, with global inflation, with a war in Europe, that their particular fixation with the Prime Minister being able to take a vacation with his family, with his friends at Christmas is very revealing, Mr. Speaker.
It is. Honorable Député de Cherbourg.
The Honourable Member for Cherbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister spent a 2-week holiday at the home of Peter Green down south, which cost taxpayers over $160,000. He claims that the Ethics Commissioner gave him the green light for the trip, but I'm not sure if the Commissioner was aware that the location of the trip was at the home of a family of donors to the Trudeau Foundation. Can the Prime Minister tell us today whether the Ethics Commissioner was aware that the invitation came from a donor to the Trudeau Foundation, yes or no? The Honourable Leader. The question is clear. Is it possible for the Prime Minister to take a holiday with his family?
So we're going to pull out of that because they just don't answer the question. So where does all this lead? Trudeau's got a problem either way, a problem with optics, maybe more. If the only way he kind of gets out of it is if he paid for that out of his own pocket. If it was paid for with tax dollars, that will generate calls for further investigation into the ethics. It won't sit well with taxpayers, with the public. It won't look good having taxpayers cough up whatever the amount might have been at the time, $9,000 a night, $5,000 a night, whatever it is, even if it was $500 a night, maybe people would accept that, but I wouldn't count on it being that dollar amount. More likely, nothing was charged. It was probably a free stay. That's what I'm taking away from question period, in the way that the questions were not answered. The lack of an answer gave us the answer. He didn't pay. The rooms were gratis. But that in itself is a problem, because the Green family, Peter Green, is a Trudeau Foundation donor. So you start to connect the dots. Now you have a prime minister, again, taking free stuff, sort of like what happened with the Aga Khan, where the prime minister ended up getting a slap on the wrist because he took a vacation, no charge, from someone who engages, on a business level with the federal government. So here he is. If he took the rooms, or the room for free, his room for free, then the opposition will argue, and probably rightly so, that it's like payola, right? It's about influence. Influence. We'll have to see where it goes. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure at this point how the financial end of that trip was handled. We don't know if Trudeau paid, if taxpayers paid, if stuff was given away for free, if it was a gift. We don't know what comes back on the other side. And you see, the Trudeau Foundation, I think you'll find Trudeau's family, his relatives, still have connections to it. And they probably, and I can't say for certain because I haven't seen any paperwork, but I'll bet, and this is one of my favorite terms, I'll bet you dollars to donuts that that the Trudeau family probably takes some money out of the Trudeau Foundation from time to time for things like speaking engagements. So you can see how the opposition is trying to connect some dots and connect enough dots with enough lines to get the prime minister tangled up in a web that will hogtie him heading into the next election. The Teflon on Trudeau is beginning to wear off. Stay with me. More ahead right after this.
Hello, world. Are you awake? Uniting humankind by liberating millions of minds at a time. Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, so Bill C-11. This is the Online Streaming Act, also known by some as the Censorship Bill. Canada's senators returned to the upper chamber today, and they began to debate a motion that could see Bill C-11 accepted with no further changes. This means that the passage of the bill is upon us. It could pass very quickly. We may have it in place before we know it. You know, I can't help but think and feel that the demonetization of our channel yesterday can't help but think that it's this has to be related. We've already seen here in Canada bizarre search engine results beginning. They are pushing mainstream media up to the top and suppressing independent media and doing everything they can to crush us. So the federal Liberals representative in the Senate, Senator Mark Gold, introduced a motion asking the Senate agree to the version of Bill C-11 that the House of Commons signed off on, and that happened last month, and not insist on several amendments that the majority of MPs voted down. So the Liberals are doing their very best to get this thing pushed through. They seem to be in a real rush to get it done. Gold's motion asks the Senate to accept the Liberals' stated intent that Bill C-11 will not apply to user-generated digital content, despite persisting concerns that the legislation has inadequate protections. The federal government has a commitment to issue policy direction to the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission. And that is really what Bill C-11 is supposed to be about. It's about Canadian content. It's about sort of taking the same concepts that apply to Canadian content on radio and television and applying them to the internet. But as a result of that wording in C-11, it can result also in censorious actions taking place and the suppression of independent media such as ours. And so in a way, it's really designed and written, I think, to protect the corporate media and the government-funded state media more than independents. And in fact, it will, I think, end up punishing and suppressing independent media. So we'll be keeping an eye on this. But it is clear that they are doing their very best to push this thing through the Senate, which is where it would be approved and then would receive royal assent to become law in this country. So we will see. We will see. Now, CBC, though, as we told you yesterday, got a taste of its own medicine. The government, I think, in a way, in an indirect way, got a taste of its own medicine when Twitter labeled the CBC as government-funded state media. We showed you that. And but they changed that today. Elon Musk tweeting, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation said they're less than 70% government funded. So, he says, it's up here on the right-hand side of your screen. The text is small, but it says here, so we corrected the label. That's Elon Musk. And here's a screenshot that shows the CBC, which says it's now 69% government-funded media. As you know, yesterday the CBC threw a hissy fit and decided that they were going to pause their participation on Twitter, no longer posting on there because they were labeled government-funded media. CBC also made a statement yesterday saying that they are, in spite of the government funding, impartial and independent. And that made me laugh. Ha ha ha. Impartial and independent. And the usual suspects have been coming to the defense of the CBC. Here's Tom Mulcair with an opinion editorial written for CTV. Tom Mulcair, for our U.S. listeners and viewers, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's the former leader of the New Democratic Party in Canada. The NDP, of course, is a left-wing, woke socialist party. Well, he's not the leader of the NDP anymore. Now he works as a pundit, a political analyst, in a way, a journalist. And today he posted this for CTV as they try to engage in some damage control here. He's running defense for the CBC and the state-funded media, and you can include CTV in that now, and all mainstream media in Canada, because every mainstream media outlet, newspapers, radio stations, television, they all receive government funding to one degree or another now. He says here, why all the fuss about Twitter describing the CBC as government-funded media? The CBC is government-funded media. It matters little if it's 69% or 70%. It's a simple fact that it is majority government funded. It doesn't mean it's bad quality media. It doesn't mean that its journalists are incompetent. Some of the best journalists I've met, he says, in my long career work for the CBC. It doesn't mean that all of its shows are lousy. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't continue. It just means that it's a government-owned creation of Parliament, not a private outfit. The government provides our state-owned broadcaster over $1 billion a year in subsidies that were voted by Parliament. These are not public subscriptions, they're government grants. The public pays its taxes and the government funds the CBC from those taxes. The public doesn't otherwise have anything to do with it or a word to say about it. And he goes on and on and on. He's defending the CBC and the government funding of it. You know, when I worked at CTV, which at the time was almost entirely funded by ad revenue, not government grants, things have changed quite a bit, actually. Today, CTV is owned by Bell Media, which is the phone and internet company, which owns probably, I don't know what percentage, but I would say maybe 40% probably of all the media assets in the country. Anyway, when I worked there, it was a network of a bunch of smaller independent companies that owned a bunch of stations, and they formed a network. private broadcasters. All of these independent stations formed a network, put together a network. They all got together and said, I own a station, you own a station, you own a couple of stations. Let's make a TV network out of this. And that's what they did. That's how CTV was formed. And you had a bunch of individual small companies or corporations, smaller corporations, combining forces to share resources and create a television network and a news network to rival the CBC, which was even back then funded with tax dollars. But you can't tell me that $1.2 billion in government funding in Canada, in a country of this size, and an operation the size of the CBC, you can't tell me that that kind of money does not influence the way the operation functions. You can't tell me that doesn't have an influence over the editorial decisions that are made at every level. You know, editorial influence is not always obvious. It is most often subtle and sometimes even downright invisible. It isn't just what media outlets decide to cover, it's what they choose not to cover. It starts right there in the newsrooms every morning, during those editorial meetings, when decisions are made over what stories will be covered through the day and what stories will be ignored, where the resources will be deployed. The news rooms across Canada, the United States, around the world, newsrooms have a funny, unusual power. You know what news is? It's whatever they decide it is. At least that's the way it used to be. Less so today because of social media. But whatever those newsrooms decide, those editors, that's the news. If they decide to cover it, it suddenly becomes news. If they decide not to cover it, it isn't news. It's not getting any attention, is it? So it starts right there. And then sometimes the reporters assigned to cover a story don't even know why they were assigned to cover it. But there's bias in everything. And if you're a news director and you know what side of your bread is buttered, or if you're a station manager or a CEO or the head of the CBC, the decisions you make absolutely influence the person underneath you and the person underneath that person, and it trickles down right to the reporter on the street or at the House of Commons or wherever the reporter might be engaged in practicing the craft of journalism. And the reporter might not really be aware of why was the decision made to send you to cover this story today. It may have started right at the very top, and you might not even be aware. And so while you're out there trying to provide impartial coverage, doing it old school, even if you are a good journalist, the reality is your very presence there was a manipulation. And in a way, it creates a distortion in reality, because you're placing emphasis on something, and that creates a particular mindset in the collective consciousness of the country. It can have profound impacts. $1.2 billion, and Mulcair is sitting there saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. It's a very, very, very big deal. It absolutely is a very big deal. When it comes to journalism, impartiality, bias, worldview, influence, all of these things, these are ethical issues. They're systemic issues. They're things that you have to grapple with as a journalist every single day. These days, I'm very uncomfortable, honestly, and I'm editorializing here now, but I'm very uncomfortable with the way the whole game is being played these days. I'm uncomfortable sitting in this chair every night because opinion has found its way into everything, including this live stream every single night. That's not where I come from. I come from the old school journalism where you try to remain as impartial as possible. It's just so deeply ingrained in me that I get the heebie-jeebies when I sit here and I offer up my opinion as I am right now. This being more analysis at this point than opinion, but there's certainly bias being presented here in even what I'm telling you right now. You have to remind yourself of that. There's bias from the beginning, even if there is no money flowing. Everyone has their own worldview, and you bring that to bear in everything that you do. That's why I also get so very uncomfortable with activism journalism, opinion journalism. When does journalism cross the line to become activism? And is an activist actually a journalist or a cheerleader? I wrestle with it. I would suggest to you that that is also why today journalists get killed. That's why journalists are detained. I worry about it as a journalist. It taints what I used to practice. And I don't know if maybe I was just naive back then. Maybe that was never pure enough. Maybe it never really was pure. Nothing is ever completely pure. Certainly not that, because as I said, there's always bias in everything. Even the attempt to provide impartial reporting, impartial journalism. I told you before, and this is absolutely true, I was never denied access to any news event because I was perceived as a threat or because I was perceived as having such a hard bias or a hard line view politically one way or the other that I couldn't be trusted to provide balanced coverage of anything. So it didn't matter what political party I was engaged with or where I went when I was working for the mainstream media, I was always allowed to come in and was always welcomed. And yet I can tell you that my coverage, especially as it evolved over time, you know, I think there was more of my bias that found its way into the reporting at the tail end of my career, which I always tried to avoid, but it inevitably found its way in. And you know who I blame for that? Rush Limbaugh. Because he sort of, through his talk shows, brought opinion more to the forefront and made it more acceptable for people. And I think that he was one of the main reasons we got such polarization within Western society and within Western media. And it was really his influence largely, I think, that accelerated the process of having opinion injected more and more and more into journalism today. And social media really just turned a little campfire into a raging inferno. It's everywhere now. It's in everything. It's almost impossible to find impartial journalism. And I think, you know, social media almost demands it. The public certainly does. If you want to build a channel, don't do what I'm doing. Even though I'm injecting my opinion here just like almost every night and into a lot of the stories that we cover, honestly, I think I'm still very much middle of the road on a lot of things, and people on both sides get angry with me because they don't want me to be. I know this from experience. If you report on something in a slanted way, the people that agree with your perspective, they'll say that you're impartial. If you do it the other way, the people on the other side will say you're impartial. But if it's the people who disagree with whatever stance you take, they're going to accuse you of being biased. You can't win. Somebody's going to end up not liking you. But the other reason you can't win on social media by being impartial is if you're impartial, people don't want to watch you. Very few people want to watch some guy who appears to be waffling on something and can't take a position. What's wrong with this guy? He's soft. Oh, this guy says this guy says that. It doesn't push people's emotional buttons. It doesn't engage them. So people change the channel and they go over and watch somebody that they think is impartial, but they're really just reinforcing that person's worldview, their bias. It's bias confirmation. And people like it. They like to get jacked up. They like to get emotional. And they like it when they're hearing what they agree with. That's why social media bombards you with mostly information that they know you like or agree with. And then every once in a while, they inject something or they put something in front of you that you really, really don't like. And that gets you angry. That keeps you engaged. That'll make you tweet because you'll get so upset. You just have to say something. You want your voice to be heard. That's the way it works. If you want to build a channel, don't do it the way that I do it. Now, I do inject my opinion. As I've said many times, I've called the Prime Minister the worst Prime Minister in Canadian history. And if that isn't an opinion, I don't know what is. Even so, with me saying something as, I would say, extreme as that, there are others who are far more extreme than I am. And I think that's probably why they have bigger followings online than I do. C'est la vie. That's the way it goes. But how does all this tie into tonight's news stories? Well, all of that ties into what we were talking about with the CBC on Twitter. And this also ties into the detention of that Wall Street Journal journalist in Russia. Let me just bring this up. So much of what I'm talking about tonight involves media, and that is because we are basically, as I've said many times, in an information war. And, the information war is a big part of even the war in Ukraine. I have so many tabs open here. I want to show you the article. I'll tell you what, just give me a moment. I'm just going to take a quick break while I find the right material to show you so I can continue this conversation. And we certainly could use your support with donations because, as you know, we've been demonetized. There's no money coming in off YouTube at all from the ads. There wasn't that much to begin with. But if we're going to keep funding the operation here, we're going to need your help. So here we go. Just give me a moment. I will return.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so here's what I wanted to show you. Russian court has upheld the detention of U.S. reporter Evan Gershkovich. The Wall Street Journal reporter is the first U.S. correspondent since the Cold War to be detained in Russia on spying allegations. So, 2 points of view on this. One from the West, one from the East. The Wall Street Journal reporter, it says here, in this Al Jazeera report, and some people think Al Jazeera is biased, and I suppose it is as biased as any other media outlet. They've got their own worldview too, but we're here looking at this. It's probably more balanced than getting something off ABC or CBS tonight on this story. But it says here, the Wall Street Journal reporter who reported on the Ukraine war from Russia is the first correspondent from the United States since the Cold War to be detained in Russia on spying allegations. Gershkovich and the U.S. government vehemently deny the allegations. Dozens of journalists crowded into the courtroom to catch a glimpse of Gershkovich, who smiled and looked calm as he stood inside a glass enclosure to appeal his detention. And so I know there is a campaign ongoing now, to get him freed. But the Russians holding on to him tight. He's accused of spying. See, this is where things get complicated in the world of journalism. Is he just a journalist, or is he a spy? What was he doing? Is he truly just a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, or was he engaged in an activity that could be defined as spying? Maybe he is a CIA plant. Maybe he works for the FBI. I don't know. Is he a CIA asset? Is he an activist journalist? Here in the West, our media is telling us that, he's just an innocent reporter. He should be protected like any other journalist. And I know over in Russia, the journalists who work there circulate and go about their business and have for a long time practiced their craft in a way that where they sort of have always performed in ways that even the Russian media would be prohibited from engaging in. The Russians have given journalists there a wide berth, a lot of latitude to say what they want to say. In other words, they've given them a lot of freedom, even more freedom than reporters who actually live in Russia, domestic journalists. And so they've enjoyed that. But here, this guy for the Wall Street Journal is now arrested. And I have to wonder why. The thing that I don't like about all of this stuff is that I know that today and for a long time, these lettered intelligence agencies have implanted their own people inside media organizations to do their dirty work, to engage in information warfare. It's a true thing. It really does happen. And you could be working as a bona fide, legitimate journalist and sitting right next to somebody who's compromised in that way, who has been basically bought off and not know it. But the thing that makes me get squeamish about all of that is that when you go into a war zone, or when a war breaks out, now governments, sovereign states, they start to look much more closely at who the players are. And they may rightly or wrongly identify someone who is working as a journalist and say, no, that's not really a journalist. That is a spy. And then they reach out and grab that person, and you see what's happening. The Russians say it's a spy. The Wall Street Journal says, no, it's just one of our reporters. Which is it? I don't know. I honestly I don't know. How could I know sitting here? Should I run to this guy's defense and say, no, he's just a journalist, when he could well be a spy? I don't know. And where is the onus? This is also international, right? It crosses borders in a time of war. Are the Russians just going to give that guy up? What was he doing? Well, as I understand it, he was trying to get some information about certain military arms, something to do with military grade paint, and maybe other information related to arms production. Or that's what the allegation is. But I get uncomfortable with it. I see that there are also journalists that go into war zones, you know, where they have very specific, and we've had them on the show. I've expressed my opinions very vocally on many things because at my age and where I'm at in my career, I've sort of, you know, when you get older as a journalist, it's more appropriate, it's more allowable for you to share your opinion because of the level of experience that you have. And maybe just it's unjustified arrogance on my behalf. And maybe a little bit of conceit, which I have to keep in check. And I should always try to be maybe a little more humble and keep my opinion to myself more, I suppose. On the other hand, people seem to expect it these days. And we've gone over why opinion is appropriate in this new form of journalism. But when you send someone into a war zone as a journalist, if their bias is clear, if it has been presented in public and one side or if both sides are aware of the bias of that journalist and they get a hold of you and the side that gets a hold of you doesn't agree with your political views and they see you as a propagandist even, your life might just be in jeopardy because they see you as an enemy combatant in a way. Let's face it, we've sat here and talked about it, haven't we? We're talking about it right now. 5th generation warfare. A big component of that is information warfare. And, you know, I hear people, the freedom people, oh, you're just a keyboard warrior. Yeah. Well, 5th generation warfare, man. Yeah, but you're not out there marching around with a flag. Yeah, well, I have been, but that's another story. The reality is somebody with a pen or a keyboard, a microphone, a camera, they're mightier than the sword. So is a government or a nation state justified in detaining a journalist, putting them on trial, trying them as a spy? I would say if they are a legitimate journalist, absolutely not. They should be absolutely left alone. On the other hand, if they are a spy, I, as a journalist, if they are actually paid on the payroll for a government intelligence agency, if they're working as a spy, you know, I don't really have that much of a problem with it because it's those guys that put actual journalists in jeopardy. Those are the guys that ruin it for all journalists and put every journalist's life in danger. Because now, any nation state, any government at war can just point a finger and say, no, that guy or that woman, that person, they're spies. And then it just sets the wheels of justice or injustice in motion, doesn't it? I have an issue with it. I don't have an answer. It will never be resolved. These are things that we can't easily solve sitting here tonight. I'm almost at the point, as I've thought about this many times, where I think there should almost be a law, at least here in Canada and the US, in the West. I think there should be a law against intelligence agencies impersonating journalists. It's against the law to impersonate a police officer. I think there should be legislation preventing intelligence agencies from having their agents pose as journalists. It would protect the institution of journalism. It would protect public trust in journalism. And now more than ever, we need to get back to news media, a journalistic standard that the public can have real trust in. This crap with the CBC, the funding, of course, it has an influence over their editorial decisions. It's just blatantly obvious. Don't make me laugh, Tom Mulcair. I'm sorry. Not sorry. Governments, they run roughshod over the institution of journalism. And that's why the public today, nobody knows what the hell is even going on. People, it's so bad, people are having a hard time grasping what reality is. I've talked about that ad nauseum. It's terrible. It's awful. This is bad. Which gets us back to this story about the Pentagon documents being leaked by that 21-year-old. Jack Teixeira, who could go to jail for like a decade, 10 years. To some, he is a hero for exposing information that shows the United States government has basically been lying to the public about the war in Ukraine. On the other side, the mainstream media, in a weird turn of, how would you put it? Well, in a weird set of circumstances, they seem to be working hand in hand with the state, with the intelligence agencies, and they're basically saying, hey, this guy deserves to go to jail. And the New York Times today, even, I think they came out and said, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, they basically said he shouldn't, this guy, Jack Teixeira, shouldn't have released those documents on Discord in this group that he was part of. He should have released them to us because we could have protected his identity. Well, that's supposed to be the role of media when you're being given information that might be in the public interest. If you have a source, you're supposed to protect them. But what happened in this case? The opposite. Now, I'm not exactly sure what chain of events took place. It's possible, and I may be behind the curve on this, but as I said yesterday, it appears to me that the Washington Post, the New York Times, and this other media outlet, Bellingcat, they basically did the job of the cops. They found this 21-year-old, I'm going to call him a kid, online, and he had top secret clearance. That's how he was able to get access to these documents to begin with. But they found this guy online in this Discord group, did what the highly paid, sophisticated, technologically advanced and equipped lettered agencies were unable to do. They found the guy. And then they ended up turning him over basically to the authorities. Now there's an argument there that maybe the lettered agencies found him and then alerted the journalist who did the story, who then outed the guy, and then the arrest was made after that. I'm not sure which way that went, but either way, it's an uncomfortable relationship for the media to be in. Somewhat inappropriate, really. That's not really the role of the media. The media is not supposed to be there working hand in hand with the authorities, because the media's job is to hold those in power accountable. Politicians, bureaucrats, police agencies, all of our institutions are public institutions. That's part of the democratic process. When that falls apart, we're all in a lot of trouble. So if you have the mainstream media simply doing the bidding of police or intelligence, now you just have media acting as a mouthpiece essentially for the deep state and working hand in glove with them. That's not appropriate. I don't give up sources. And some people are probably going to sit here tonight and say, wait a minute, I remember a time when you did this or did that, and you revealed the name of this person or ran this thing. Anytime I've ever run anything from anybody, I've never made a promise to them. Rule of thumb, if I never made a promise that I didn't keep. If I promise to protect someone's identity, I protect it. Period. If it's in the best public interest, I will continue to protect it. And even if it's not, if I promise to protect it, I'll continue to protect it. If I've ever run a clip, if I've ever shared any information, I've done so because it was appropriate to do, because no such promise was ever made, no commitment for privacy was ever made in any interviews that I ever did. And so it was in the public interest to run it. And that's why I did it. For instance, there was an email during some of that investigative reporting that I was doing a few months back that was sent to me. And right in the email, the person who sent it to me said that I could share it. And actually, the person encouraged me to do so, to share it publicly. And I did. And when I did that, I was attacked, and people said, you shouldn't be sharing a private email, because they didn't understand. And even though I said that exact thing, I read it, what was written right on there, where I was given permission to use it, I was accused of doing something improper, which was not the case. I have ethical standards that I adhere to. All journalists should. However, spies don't. People working for the CIA, I don't know what ethics those guys have. The stuff they get involved in, it's not about saving lives, it's about starting wars most of the time, it seems. Now, I don't know this guy from the Wall Street Journal. I'm not in favor personally of having any journalist arrested, put on trial for the reporting that they're doing. On the other hand, even as a reporter, if you're digging around trying to get top secret information on a government, and you're in a country where you're not even a citizen, I would say you're taking one hell of a risk. So if you're doing something like that, if you're trying to uncover information and then reveal it to the public that is top secret from a foreign government where you're in their country under their jurisdiction legally, and they catch you, what are they supposed to do? Just go, oh, well, forget about it. The reality is, if you're a journalist, sometimes the work that you do can be very, very dangerous. And maybe in this case, what that journalist was doing was maybe in the public interest. I don't know. But it might have been in Russia highly illegal. And because he's in Russia, he's subject to Russian law, not U.S. law. And now we have a court case unfolding. So I'm not really taking a stand on this one way or the other. I'm just kind of laying it out for people and trying to give you the lay of the land, man. This is the way it is over there right now. So here in the West, of course, the position is this guy is the real deal. He's an unbiased journalist. He doesn't deserve this. On the other side, he's a spy. Coming up, we have John Mark Dougan, a guy who's working as a journalist in Moscow, he's going to join us on the program. And that is one of the subjects that I will ask him about. And you'll hear what he has to say, his perspective, his Moscow perspective. And it's as valid as any other out there. And what about this guy with the Pentagon documents? Well, again, I mean, it's a bit of an ethical thing, right? It's like the documents that he got, I think that the information that is being revealed does serve the public interest, because it shows the U.S. government has been lying about a lot of things. It shows, these documents show that the United States has actually had troops on the ground in Ukraine, and that they do. The documents show that the war is not going as well as the United States and its media allies are trying to lead the public to believe. These documents show that it's highly unlikely, maybe even impossible, for Ukraine to win the war. And yet over here, we're being fed this information, which paints exactly the opposite picture. So is this guy a hero or a criminal? Defense Department officials, well, we heard John Kirby just the other day say that it's inappropriate, it's wrong for the media to even be publishing or showing the public any of the information in these documents, because in his view, the information isn't supposed to be out there. And that is true. It was all top secret stuff. It's not supposed to be revealed to the public. That begs the other question. In a democracy, how much secrecy is appropriate? Maybe there should be laws passed to prevent the government from keeping this kind of information secret to begin with. Maybe that's really the solution, so that people don't have to steal it, essentially, and risk their lives or risk their freedom in order to bring the truth to light, so that the public knows. In a democracy, it's taxpayers that fund everything, right? The country, the politicians, the bureaucracy, the whole machine of government, everything. It's supposed to serve the people. The idea of secrecy is in itself repugnant to me. I think that's really ultimately the answer. But I personally, as a journalist, I don't really want to encourage anyone to go and steal anything, to then bring the information to me so that I can then protect their identity and then bring that information to the public and then potentially risk someone's freedom in order to have to do that. I don't want to encourage that. Maybe it's the right thing to do because the public needs to know. Maybe it would save a lot of lives, bring a war to an end. Who knows? But to have to go to those lengths to begin with, that in itself is inappropriate. The need to expose information that's in the public interest runs against the grain. It puts journalists and whistleblowers instantly into a position of criminality. We need more transparency in government, more transparency in the way these institutions run. Ultimately, that, I suppose, is the solution. More transparency, legislation to prevent government spies from posing as journalists, to protect the institution of journalism, to protect the safety of journalism, so that when journalists are out there working in the field, there's that additional layer of protection over all journalists, because then any government, the public, our society can then point to that and say, wait a minute, highly unlikely that guy is a spy, because we have laws that prevent the government or any intelligence service from having any agent pose or impersonate a journalist. But then it begs the question, what is a journalist? And then it gets blurry again because you have citizen journalists, you have government, state-sponsored or funded journalists. All the mainstream media now receives government money. I think that in itself actually puts the safety of journalists working in Russia and Ukraine right now in jeopardy, because if you're working for the West, if you're working for a Canadian media outlet and you're in any country, in any war zone, any foreign government that opposes what the Canadian foreign policy is can point their finger at you and say, no, you're a spy. You're getting paid off by the government. And in a way, they might actually have a point, CBC. How much funding does it take before influence becomes obvious? How much funding does it take before influence is just present in a subtle or invisible way? You see how complex these issues become and how important they are? It runs to the very core of our society, our communities, the decisions that we make over whether we go to war or we don't go to war, how much support there is from the public for war, how public opinion is formulated, how consent is manufactured. And it's just so unfortunate that we have to have whistleblowers sitting in jail at all, like Julian Assange, Snowden. You know, those are the two biggest names out there right now. And, you know, and then, you know, a lot of people are out there who are journalists who say, we have to free a Julian Assange. Yeah, I know. I get it, man. But I don't think these issues are personally, and this is just my personal opinion, and people can disagree with me because people do tend to want to, they tend to want to just take these issues and simplify them as much as possible to make them easier to understand, I think, for the public. And, you know, people just always bring their own bias to bear on these issues anyway. But I just personally, I'm sitting here just off the top of my head talking about these issues. And to me, it's complex. It's not black and white. It isn't simple. I think government policies, got the laws that we have, the way our institutions are set up, this is a big part of the problem. It's the secrets that are out there to begin with, especially in a democracy, that create the problem to begin with. The public does deserve to know, I think, exactly what's going on. At the same time, you have to weigh that against the safety of troops when you're at war. How much information can you really have out there before you start putting lives at risk? Well, you know, the state always hides behind that, don't they? Oh, we can't reveal any information because it might reveal too much and that could put lives at risk. So we can't tell you anything. Heck, just on that vacation thing alone with Justin Trudeau going to Jamaica and staying at that $9,000 a night villa, he actually alluded to security being a reason why he couldn't answer one of those questions. It was just fleeting, but it was in there. And so they use that as a crutch, these stupid politicians. Sorry, I'll take the word stupid back for the moment, just in the interests of maintaining decorum. That was a bit of a slip. Too much emotion bubbling to the surface. Because I know that all of this really does put journalists' lives at risk. Because it throws their credibility, their authenticity into question instantly. All journalists, working journalists out there with a big question mark over them that governments see instead of press written across their vest on the front when they're in a war zone. Just a big question mark. Journalist, activist, or propagandist? Friend or foe? Impartial or bias? A threat? A spy? Or just somebody out there trying to do their job and do the right thing and bring information to the public? You throw that into question, everything starts to fall apart. And I'm seeing it every day. Online, mainstream media, everywhere. It's so bad, people no longer know what to believe. Don't go away. I've got more coming up.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
And they have a deal. Dominion voting machines and Fox News have a $787.5 million settlement in that defamation lawsuit. So I guess opening statements in this case were about to commence, and they settled with an 11th hour deal. This headed off a trial shortly after the jury was sworn in. And John Poulos, Dominion CEO, held a news conference and said, Fox has admitted to telling lies. Money is accountability, said Stephen Shackelford Jr., the attorney scheduled to give opening statements for Dominion voting machines. And Fox News issued a statement as well, saying the court's rulings finding certain claims about Dominion to be false. He goes on and says, this settlement reflects Fox's continued commitment to the highest journalistic standards. We are hopeful that our decision to resolve this dispute with Dominion amicably, instead of the acrimony of a divisive trial, allows the country to move forward from these issues. So they reached this resolution after the jury had actually been brought in and had been sat, but the opening statements didn't begin. So, I mean, talk about last minute. So this battle has been going on for months. And the mainstream media, aside from Fox, saying that this was all related to, conspiracy theories going back to the election in 2020. That's their language. So Fox News settled, but it's a situation here, I would say, where it was up to Fox. The onus was on Fox to prove the allegations. That was a tall order. That was a tall order. Proof was their defense. But coming up with that proof in a way that could be presented effectively and without doubt, you got to get the ballots. You have to be able to show the numbers. You need the records. A lot of that stuff, I think, has been destroyed. So difficult. You're talking about election records. But that's the way this will come to an end. People will still talk about it. It will continue to be an issue. People will believe one way or the other. And it will continue to percolate heading into the next presidential election. But in terms of this particular case, it's a done deal now. So that'll settle down. And I think one of the reasons, very likely, that Fox decided to settle this way with that dollar amount was simply because the damage to its reputation would be substantial if it went to trial and it dragged on and they couldn't prove what they had alleged. It would have been a trial that could have left scars on their credibility, I think, rightly or wrongly. And whether there was actual proof out there or not, I think the point that I'm making here is that even if there was actual proof out there, it would have been difficult, maybe even impossible for them to cultivate it and harvest it. So that's where we get where we're at tonight with all of this. And I can tell you as well that that whole issue with the voting machines, that controversy is finding its way up into Canada. Now, later this week, we should have Rachel Emmanuel joining us on the program. And that will be one of the things she's going to talk about. She is a reporter who lives out in Alberta, Canada. And that province is a political hot potato right now. They are just about to go into a provincial election there, which will determine whether the current sitting Conservative Premier, Danielle Smith, is, I'll say elected because she was chosen as the Premier, the leader of the party, and assumed the position of Premier without actually being elected by the people as the Premier. So this would be the first real test of her resilience and ability to govern, to determine if she really does have, if her government as a whole has public support to continue. And being a conservative and also tapping into some of that populist movement that is out there right now. It's the election to watch right now in Canada and for many in the US as well, because it's going to be a reflection, I think, of what you can probably expect to happen even in the United States heading into the next presidential election. It will be a bit of a prelude to all of that, because I think the politics, the public mood out in Alberta is very reflective right now of what is going on in even the United States politically. Very, very emotional, very politically charged, very polarized. And do not underestimate the woke left and the NDP out there, which was previously in power and is challenging the United Conservative Party under Danielle Smith. And I'm very excited to be having Rachel back on the show. She's very sharp, great reporter. She covers politics out there, and this issue of voting machines, it is a concern for voters out in Alberta, and they've been discussing that out there. She will bring perspective to that for us when she appears on the program later this week. I'm not sure which night, but it's coming. She was messaging with me today, and I know that's going to happen. So excited about that. This guy or person, I'll say person. And this is another story that just, it's going to set off some, this is going to push some buttons. Leo sent me this story today. Thank you, Leo. This out of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. This person is wanted in a sexual assault. Windsor Police Service say they're searching for this person. This incident that they're investigating took place on April 4th, earlier this month. A female victim contacted police to report, and this is from Windsor Police, what I'm reading here. A female victim contacted police to report that she had been sexually assaulted while staying at a Windsor women's shelter. The suspect, who was also residing at the shelter at the time, allegedly climbed into the victim's bed and sexually assaulted her. The suspect has been identified as 32-year-old Desiree Anderson, who may also be known as Cody D'Entremont. The suspect is described as 5'7" tall, 141 pounds, with brown eyes and brown hair. The suspect is alleged to frequent the downtown area of Windsor. And then anyone with information on this incident or the whereabouts of the suspect is urged to contact the Windsor Police Major Crimes Unit at 519-255-6700, extension 4830, or Crime Stoppers anonymously at 519-258-8477 tips, or online at catchcrooks.com. So, are you seeing what the story is here? This person went to this shelter, obviously told them that they identify as a woman, and insisted on staying there instead of at the men's shelter, ended up staying there, and then is alleged, and this has not been proven in court, so we do not know exactly what the circumstances are, and evidence has to be presented, and this person is innocent until proven guilty. But the allegation is that a man or a person, or maybe a woman, I don't know how to describe this, crawled into bed with one of the female residents staying at the women's homeless shelter and sexually assaulted the person, the woman. So now they're looking for this person. So I look at this person, to me, that looks like a man. So then the question is this really a person who identifies as a woman, or was this a man pretending to do that, who really doesn't identify as a woman, but just said it to get into the women's shelter in order to do what happened? Or maybe it didn't happen at all. Maybe the guy's innocent. But let's, for the sake of argument here, say that there was a sexual assault. But you see how easy it would be, and this is theoretical now, like I'm not saying this is what happened, but what if you just have some dude who decides that he wants to get into the women's shelter to do something bad, like sexually assault someone, and just says, oh no, I identify as a woman. And because of the way the political environment is right now, they actually let the guy in. I'm just throwing that out there. And there's so many nuances, so many variations in the way people think about things sexually. Just because someone says they identify as a woman doesn't mean they're not attracted to women. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just throwing this stuff out there. I hate talking about it because I'm always afraid I'm going to say just one wrong thing. Because it's not that I have an issue with anybody. I just have an issue trying to figure out what the language is these days. The language always evolves, right? In society. And when it comes to something like this, I'm always trying to figure out now what the right thing to say is. What are you allowed to say? What are you not allowed to say? The community standard on it changes all the time. I don't want to step on a landmine, blow myself up here. I'm just concerned about people's safety. And that's why we're showing you the image here right now, because police are looking for this person. So anyway, this is sort of a regional story for me. And I think it's because we've seen this whole issue of transgenderism politicized and blow up as a news story that has remained in the news cycle now for weeks, if not months, maybe for years, really. In a background sense, it's been there, but now it's like at a fever pitch because of all the stories that are being done, all the different things that are happening out there, as you know, and the protests. So I bring it out. So it's a story of absolute note that I think this could actually go national, international in terms of the amount of coverage and attention it is likely to receive. It's kind of a weird story to me in a very weird time. I don't know. I do know that everything has become volatile where anything surrounding those issues is concerned now. And people are very emotional about it because it involves kids on both sides. So not only was that sent to me today, but also people were sending me the information like this. And this isn't brand new, but it is still front and center for many people. Parents raise concerns as Florida bans gender-affirming care for trans kids. This from National Public Radio, NPR. And it's a whole story here about, people with the opposite point of view. Parents with kids that they say are trans or whatever, on the, I would say the populist, conservative, freedom side. Everyone on that side is taking the stance that we have to save the children. We can't allow, what do they call it here? Gender affirming medical care, which is to say transitioning kids from one sex to another. It's been going on for quite a while. I try to have an open mind about a lot of things. I don't want to get too deep into some of this stuff, but I'm pointing this out because, the people on this side, on the portrayed in this story, they also, these parents, they're emotional about it. They're saying that their children's safety is at risk, that they're trying to protect their children from the people on the other side of the political spectrum who are saying that they're the ones fighting for the children and they're trying to save people. So everybody's got save the children in their heads, which is one of the most emotional motivators that there can be out there. If you think, or if you are convinced, if you believe that what you're doing, if your stance on an issue is there to save the children, you're going to fight like hell. And you're going to dig in and you are not going to budge an inch on anything. And your ears are going to be closed too. You're not going to be willing to really engage in any kind of conversation about it. You're going to be very rigid in your view. From me reading this story, and then also seeing this video, which was sent to me. Let me see if I can find it here for you. It was sent to me and this is a video about, oh, where did it go? So many tabs to open here. I will find it again. This is a video about gay people, transgender people, people from the LGBTQS plus community. Living this situation in Florida is such that they are actually fleeing the state, I guess. And many of these people from the LGBTQS plus community feel that Ron DeSantis has Oh, that's why I couldn't find it. Because it looked like the newspaper article. Okay, so let me bring this back. They think that the policies of Ron DeSantis are putting their lives in jeopardy. And they think that they actually believe that the government down there and people on the far right want to kill them and use these new laws that DeSantis has brought in to deal with some of these issues. They want to use these laws to essentially execute gay people. I'm just going to run a little bit of this just so you kind of get where their headspace is at. And then I'm just going to comment briefly on it.
Also recently banned life-saving gender-affirming care for trans youth, and it's gotten so bad.
This is from the Humanist Report, which I've never seen before, but it was sent to me by someone who has been very, active in the freedom movement, but this person is actually from the LGBTQS plus community. And until just recently, they were all in on the freedom movement. Not so much now, because this person who sent me this video today subscribes to this perspective, and maybe some of these concerns are legitimate, but just listen to what this is said here.
That the state's largest queer civil rights organization has issued a travel advisory instructing people to avoid the state if they can, if they happen to be queer. As ABC News reports, Equality Florida says the advisory issued Wednesday was prompted by the passage of laws that are hostile to the LGBTQ community, restrict access to reproductive health care, repeal gun safety laws, foment racial prejudice, and attack public education by banning books and censoring curriculum. The organization is urging families to consider relocation, asking students to reconsider attending colleges and universities in the state, and recommending that conference and event hosts relocate out of the state. Now, this advisory comes as a majority of queer parents are currently considering leaving the state over anti-LGBTQ plus policies, and in response to news that queer people are basically being forced to flee the state because it's become so hostile towards queer people, well, Ron DeSantis's press secretary, Christina Pushaw, publicly encouraged this by tweeting a hand-waving emoji in response to a survey that confirms that queer families are indeed fleeing the state as a result of anti-LGBTQ plus extremism. So this is who we're dealing with here. In response to news that their policies are forcing people out of their own state, what are they saying? Bye. Sorry. They're not rethinking their extremism. They're not thinking maybe we're going too far. And Florida really is a state that welcomes everyone, even folks who have lifestyles that we disagree with. No, they're not even saying that anymore. They're saying, adios. If you don't like it, too bad.
So that's that perspective on it. I can tell you this. Okay, first of all, I'm not gay. I'm not part of the LGBTQS plus community. So if you're thinking that, you're wrong. I'm not. If I was, I would tell you. Because I don't think it should be a big deal. But that's the thing, isn't it? They're making a thing out of it. Everybody's making a thing out of it. They're making a thing out of it with identity politics, which I don't adhere to. I don't believe in identity politics. I think identity politics is harmful, destructive, and I think it gets you to exactly the place we're at right now, where people fight. The woke left talks about inclusivity, and they embrace identity politics, but they embrace identity politics and inclusivity through coercion. They want to go beyond tolerance to enforced acceptance. And not just enforced acceptance, but endorsement. You're supposed to endorse it, embrace it, not just accept it, but promote it, embrace it. That's what they want. I disagree with that. I believe in tolerance. You don't go beyond tolerance. You can't go beyond tolerance. You go beyond tolerance, you get coercion, you get fascism. The people on the other side, They're saying you've gone too far. They're not going to give you another inch. And I've said those words myself. You can't give the woke left another inch because they've taken too much already. That's largely true here. But I don't have a good solution to this because I kind of feel like everybody's being manipulated to some degree. I can only tell you this. Because of all of this going on, it's also destroying, if you want to call it the freedom movement or the populist movement, it's destroying it. Maybe not completely destroying it, but it's putting giant cracks in it. Because if you go back just over a year ago to Ottawa, it was the issue that was the main focus in Ottawa was the medical mandates and the civil liberties issues. That's what brought everyone together there. That's what everyone was uniting behind. And as a result, if you were gay or part of the LGBTQ plus community, whatever, you were welcomed and you would get hugs. But today, not so much. And don't sit there and tell me, because I have eyes and ears and I can see exactly what's going on. Don't tell me that largely what we have on our hands here right now is an anti-LGBTQS plus campaign. It has been resurrected. There's no doubt about it. I mentioned Rush Limbaugh. He engaged in exactly this kind of rhetoric for a long time. I liked Rush Limbaugh. But there's no question that he did engage in this kind of rhetoric and used it as a political tool, as a wedge issue, for sure. Rightly or wrongly, I'm just telling you that he did. And right now what's going on is what I'm trying to tell you is the freedom movement or the populist movement or even, political parties like the PPC, you're losing support. You're losing the people who are from the LGBTQS plus community. They're leaving. In my estimation, this campaign is not a winning strategy. It is a trap. It is eroding the foundation of these political movements on this side. And I won't even call it the right, because it's too hard to define, because you've got people from various political stripes from across the spectrum who make up whatever this movement is. It's the civil liberties issues that bind the people. But this is scaring some of the people away, all of basically the gay people. They don't feel welcome anymore. They feel threatened. I'm showing you right now. This is what they're seeing. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to, but I can see it. They feel threatened. They're afraid. They're afraid. Now, we had Weldon H.E. on here, Thong Man from Barrie, Ontario. He was on. He talked about being basically a transgender person who identifies as a woman, but even he said that he identifies as a woman who is a lesbian, so he actually likes women. Wrap your head around it. It's cool with me. Whatever you want, man. I love Weldon. He's a good man. Or person. Sorry, Weldon. I don't know what pronoun to use. I didn't even ask him. Okay. Don't know. That's all insane to me. The language stuff. I'm not comfortable with any of it. I'm not comfortable with what happened with that person who's wanted for questioning in that sexual assault case. Not comfortable with any of it. I'm not sitting here pretending I have answers. I'm not. This is just a really bad place. For a while, it seemed like things had simmered down. And, Florida, see, now, what I'm going to say here is this. I think there is the views on both sides are probably more extreme than reality dictates. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Do I really think based on the information that I have, and even from what I've seen and what has been sent to me today, that the state of Florida wants to start executing, that the people on the far right want to start executing gay people. There might be some wackos out there who are thinking that way, but I don't think Ron DeSantis or his administration has that in mind at all. Now, they're firmly against wokeism. So yeah, I see where they're coming from on this too, and their position, pretty hard line. But you have a pretty big LGBTQS plus community down there in Florida. Have you ever been to Key West? I have been. What a fun place. You want to explore a community that is made up largely of people from that side of the fence, the LGBTQS plus community. Take a vacation down there. My wife and I went down there one year. I had no idea what I was walking into, but wow, what a fun place. And met some really wonderful people. Do I think Ron DeSantis wants that whole tourist area to dry up and chase all those people out of the state? I don't believe that to be true. I think he wants to keep it out of the schools. And you can watch that video from the Humanist Report is what it was called. They have a whole channel if you want to go watch that, or go seek out the ABC report on that, get your own perspective on it. I understand how it can be interpreted that way. I'm saddened by all of this. I feel like I'm standing here and I'm looking at two giant groups of people fighting when they don't really need to be fighting. When the solutions to me seem so simple. Stop putting it into schools in front of kids. Just stop doing that. Not a good idea. It's pissing people off. Stop, and over here, mind your own damn business. In fact, both sides, just mind your own damn business, shake hands, and try to tolerate each other. Get back to a place of tolerance. Live and let live. Nobody hurts anybody. But that's just me. And I would go back, so I'm just looking in the chat here. Hallow says, fight, fight, fight. No. Just somebody's asking me, did I have a good time down there? Dennis. Yeah, my wife and I had a great time. When I was down there, they had the most beautiful sunset. The ocean, calm like glass that night. And the sun. Everybody stands there. And they look out, and we're all looking out over the ocean, just hundreds and hundreds of people. And just looking out over the ocean and the sun, perfectly centered, slowly setting. And it was the most beautiful sunset I think I've ever seen in Key West. Now, I can tell you, too, that here where I live, not even an hour away, probably 35 minutes from here, Mitchell's Bay, Ontario. You can, if I drive up there, the sunset's there. Spectacular. Beautiful sunsets over the bay. And you stand there and that sun just a little bit lower, and then it just blinks off like a light bulb when it just drops below the horizon. Would I go back to Key West? Yeah, I'd go back. Pretty crazy place. Met some interesting folks down there. Went on a ghost walk. They have a lot of ghost stories, shipwrecks, a lot of history down there. Explorers, Spanish history. Pretty cool place. I don't think Ron DeSantis wants to destroy that. The truth is somewhere in the middle, folks. It's not as extreme as that. It's not as extreme as that. Honestly, it's somewhere in the middle. If you're a gay person, I don't think you need to live in fear of being executed. And if you're on the other side, chill. Everybody chill. Can we just learn to get along a little bit? Don't go away. I'm going to take a break. And then when we come back, just hang on a second. Just a couple of things. I also wanted to mention, because I sort of forgot a couple of things. Loblaws, grocery store chain. The reason they have a new CEO now to replace Galen Weston. Loblaws is like a big grocery store chain in Canada. So I just mentioned this because I let that clip with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democratic Party, run during question period, where he was talking about big corporations, grocery store chains like Loblaws making huge profits and paying their CEO over 400 times more than the average worker. And so I just put this out there because also we keep hearing that inflation, from his perspective and from the woke left, socialist, NDP, even the liberals, they blame the companies like Loblaws for inflation because they're just charging too much money for stuff. So I just throw that out there because Galen Weston is stepping back from day-to-day operations of Loblaw companies in a senior leadership shuffle that will see a European retail executive take over as president and CEO. So the grocer and drugstore chain said today that the chief executive of Denmark's leading grocery retailer, Sailing Group AS Per Bank, will join the company in early of 2024. So I didn't get this guy's name. Let me see if I can find it for you here. At this point, it probably doesn't matter that much. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and that's why I let that clip run, because I was aware that this was going down here today. I just wasn't completely familiarized with the story. In any case, we'll probably talk about this in more detail in the days ahead. But yeah, they're going through a shakeup there. And they're going to have somebody new kind of at the helm. So interesting timing as well. Is there anything else that I missed here before we pick up with John Mark Dougan? I think that's pretty much it. I think we've covered most of the ground here tonight. So let me take that break. And when we come back, journalist John Mark Dougan will join us direct from Moscow, Russia. Don't go away.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
The program, I truly appreciate it very much. I guess first up, there's so much going on with the conflict in Ukraine, just the tensions between NATO, Russia, the United States, Canada, and one of the things that's really in the news cycle right now is this case involving the Wall Street Journal journalist who is still detained, and I guess he was just back in a Russian court, and they have decided to continue to detain him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, he's hanging out near a military base. He's meeting with insiders trying to get secret documents regarding military activity in Russia. If this was anybody, if this was a Russian citizen in the United States doing the same activities, they would have the exact same treatment. And you can't tell me that they wouldn't, because if we take, for instance, Anna Chapman or Maria Butina, right? Butina was just friends with some Congress people. She wasn't doing anything, and they arrested her for being a foreign agent. So, nobody can say that the treatment would be any different in the United States than it has been here.
Yeah. I guess with a case like this, there are always accusations that fly back and forth from one side to the other, each one accusing each side of violating free speech and media rights, media freedom. And I guess that's something that hits home pretty close for you too, because you've experienced that same kind of struggle. And even just recently, I think your YouTube channel was demonetized.
Yeah, sure. And free speech is a big deal, but there's a difference in free speech. There's a difference between free speech and exposing sensitive military military secrets. Right now, there's some people say I'm a hypocrite because of my stance on this journalist who's 23 years old. I'm not journalist. The National Guardsman, the 23-year-old kid that got arrested.
Actually, 21, Jack Teixeira. I think he's only 21. He's very, very young.
21. Yeah. Well, but there's a very big difference in the two. There's a very big difference in the two.
So how do you see? Where do you see the distinction? What is the difference for you?
The distinction is with the government is doing nothing but lying to the American people. The United States government is lying to the American people. They're selling them a bill of goods that they don't want, and they're stealing their money in order to fund this. And, that is not the same thing as exposing sensitive military secrets. It's just not, Yes, military secrets were exposed in the American breach. But it's all a pack of lies that they're selling the American people. And it's very different here. They're trying to sell stuff on this journalist, the Wall Street Journal journalist, was near a military base in Yekaterinburg, trying to get sensitive documents regarding a new reflective radar absorbent paint that the Russians have developed. Now, this is a big difference.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting here in the West where the media is sort of ignoring the contents of the documents that were leaked from the Pentagon and focusing really on the arrest of the 21-year-old airman, Jack Teixeira. Why do you think that they're doing that? Is it because these documents have contained embarrassing information for the Pentagon, showing that they've even had U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, it's not embarrassing just for the Pentagon. It's embarrassing for the U.S. media, because these are supposed to be the watchdogs of government who are doing nothing but feeding the hens to the foxes. These, you know, the U.S. media, the Western media in general, has been covering for the United States, covering up all their lies. They are not doing any fact checking whatsoever. And with the exposition of these documents, it shows how complicit that the Western media is in helping the U.S. government, I guess, push this war to the American people.
It isn't just that. It's seeing journalists, New York Times, Washington Post, this Bellingcat media organization, basically doing the work of police that the FBI couldn't find this 21-year-old, even though he was online posting this stuff publicly. They couldn't seem to find him, but these journalists interviewed some of the young guys in there and then basically turned him over to the authorities. That is very unusual. And I, as a journalist, I don't think I would ever do that. You always want to protect your sources.
Well, that's shocking to me. That is shocking to me. In fact, there's a New York Times journalist. I'm not going to say his name, but we communicate sometimes. And I told him how despicable it was. And his excuse was, well, we had to make sure that it wasn't Russian disinformation. And I'm like, you know, that's such a load of crap. I was like, so you're going to tell me that every single source that comes to any outlet whatsoever and hands over documents, the New York Times is going to expose these people on the grounds that they might be pushing Russian disinformation? I'm like, that is such a load of crap.
Well, it sort of compromises the integrity of media. I think it, in many respects, undermines public trust in the institution of journalism. What do you think?
It does. It does. And who would ever trust to be a source for the New York Times anymore? I mean, I sure as hell wouldn't. If I because you know what? And it's funny because do you remember my Nord Stream whistleblower back in I did a live stream October 2nd?
Yes.
This same journalist asked to get in touch with him. And I said, okay, well, I'll contact him and let him know and see what he says. And so I did, and he said, well, where's he from? And I was like, he's from the New York Times. And he's like, nope. He's like, I might as well just be giving my identity to the U.S. government. He's right. He's 100% right.
Well, that's very clear now after seeing what has happened with Jack Teixeira, who is now facing up to 10 years in prison for revealing these documents. Do you think Jack Teixeira should go to jail, or is he is he doing the public a public service by exposing this information?
He shouldn't go to jail. No. He shouldn't go to jail because, you know, if the U.S. government was upfront with people and was telling them what was really happening, this is what we're doing. Yeah, we got boots on the ground. Yeah, we're doing this and this and this. That would be one thing. But the United States government, look, they are paid and funded by the American taxpayer. It is our right to be the watchdogs of our own government. And when they start lying and misleading the people for their own benefit and their own enrichment, because that's exactly what's happening. The weapons industrial complex is definitely enriching themselves. They are making billions and billions. And they are laundering billions of dollars through the corrupt Ukrainian governments. You know, when it's their duty to be exposing this. It's their duty because they are sworn to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when you have a government like we have right now, a military-industrial complex in bed with this government, and they are funding this war, they're getting people killed all around the world. our enemy is domestic.
Well, John, it's pretty clear that from these documents that the war is not going as well for the West as the United States would have the public believe. In fact, it looks like Ukraine is losing quite badly, and as things escalate here, I'm just wondering how long do you think it's going to be before the United States and other NATO countries start coming for the young men and women to put more actual U.S., Canadian, and NATO forces on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, here's the thing with that, okay? First of all, most of us over here, most people in the know, most people who have been paying attention know that Ukraine is not winning. They haven't been winning. They've been suffering huge casualties. And now the people know that the U.S. government has been lying all along. Countries are fed up, especially in the EU. The United States has been pushing these lies. They've destroyed manufacturing in Germany, right? BASF laid off 2,500 people because they can't afford to make chemicals anymore because of the electricity costs. There's a huge steel manufacturing company, very old, one of the oldest in the world. They went out of business. They filed for bankruptcy in Germany. You have protests in France. And now these documents reveal how badly that the American government has been lying to the people. The question is, how, is the American people actually going to stand for it? Are they going to be sheep and they're going to give up their sons and daughters? Or are they going to be like, you know what? Yes, the U.S. government has been lying to us. Let's not delude ourselves, just because we're Democrats, for instance. They have been lying to us. They've been lying about this war. They've been lying about the reasons for this war. And now they're going to get our kids killed. Is the American public going to stand for that? And I'm going to say Democrat or Republican, when it comes time to be their child that has to go to the front lines, they're going to say no.
This is a war that isn't just kinetic. It's being fought on many levels. There's the information war. There's also, the economic war. Where do things stand there in Russia right now? Over here, we're experiencing runaway inflation. Prices are off the chart. The value of the Canadian and U.S. dollars is declining. Spending power is diminished. People's savings are being eaten up by inflation. What's happening over there in Russia?
It's pretty much the opposite. Our food prices pretty much have stayed the same. Some minor inflation here and there, but I can still get. They don't sell a dozen eggs; they sell like 10 or 15. I can get 15 eggs for $1.20. Fuel has not changed in price since the start of the conflict. Let's see. I'm still eating out at restaurants almost, 4 times a week, and I make $1,500 a month, right? I got maybe $2,000 a month. It depends, but I've got a nice apartment. My utility bills, all of them combined, including my cable television, my mobile phone, my water, and my heat, and my electricity, are under $100 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you guys are taking the brunt of it. And what's interesting is, some companies have played really fun games at the expense of the American people. Let me give you an example. At the beginning of this, we had companies that said, we're going to be woke and we're going to pull out of the Russian market because we don't like what they're doing. Well, that was all BS, right? It's just they didn't want the backlash from the American people. So, for instance, Coke and Pepsi pulled out. Well, Pepsi was the original cola in Russia. Okay, it was Pepsi that was set up here in the 90s before Coca-Cola, and so Pepsi had the foothold. And then Pepsi pulled out. Coca-Cola said they were going to pull out, and Coca-Cola didn't. You go to the store, you can buy all the Coca-Cola products, and like I can get a 2-liter thing of Coca-Cola for about $1. And Pepsi is nowhere to be found. Well, Pepsi screwed themselves, and now, and Pepsi even admits this, they went back to the U.S., they pulled out of the Russian market, and they've charged a lot more in the American market because they have to make up for their losses. And Pepsi flat out admitted this when they got caught last month.
Yeah, well, we
So-
certainly seem to be paying the price over here, because I can tell you that a 2-liter bottle of Coke here where I live is $2.50. So if you're paying like $1, the equivalent of $1, then yeah, that kind of lays it all right out there.
Yeah, maybe $1.20. It just depends on the conversion rate.
Right. We are seeing attempts to escalate on the Ukrainian side, and I guess they're shelling right now around, I think it's the 7th largest nuclear power facility in the world, which is giving rise to real concern. Any information on that you can share with us?
We're talking about the Zaporozhye power plant, yes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was actually in Zaporozhye power plant. It was several months ago, six or 7 months ago. It was at the time when it was after Russians had control of it. And I remember hearing these stories about how the Russians are bombing the power plant. I'm like, what the hell are they even talking about? Because I was there and no such thing was happening. So yeah, but the Ukrainian government, they don't care. They're willing to kill everybody. And just so they can blame Russia. And they know they can get away with it because the Western media is complicit in their lying.
Yeah, so I guess the shelling has been going on all around the plant, and if some real concerns there, and that area is controlled by Russia, but the Ukrainians have been lobbing shells in, and if they hit that plant, it would be, I guess, 5, 6, 7, maybe even more times that the disaster that Chernobyl was. So we're
Yeah,
certainly watching that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you did mention recently some concerns about the ongoing what you, I guess you would characterize as U.S. violations of rule of law as it relates to seizure of assets, for Russian citizens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Not just U.S. violations, but the whole entire West cumulatively.
Right.
They've gone after rich Russians, stolen their assets, no proof of any wrongdoing. Now, this is not new to America. America has been doing civil forfeiture for many, many years, since I think the late 90s, where if they pull you over and you have a large amount of cash in your car, they can seize it and they can keep it, and they will fight you for it until you can adequately, keyword adequately, prove where that money came from. Now, so this has been happening in the United States. They've expanded this internationally. The United States has been excuse me, stealing assets from all sorts of people. The same has not been done here in Russia. The United States, the Russian government has not seized any American property, with the exception of, I think, Hewlett Packard. And there's an exception to that one, and I'll tell you why. Hewlett Packard entered into an agreement, okay, with a bunch of Russian companies to sell them servers and then provide support for a specified period of time, and these companies all paid for that support. And now Hewlett Packard pulls out and says, well, we're not going to honor those contracts anymore. And the money you paid us, well, you're basically shish kebab out of luck, I guess we'll say. And the Russian government didn't like that. And they said, you know what? No, they paid for it. They're getting the services one way or the other. And that's the only seizure here in Russia of any American assets whatsoever. So it really stinks to high heaven. And frankly speaking, who's going to trust the American government after that? Who's going to trust them? Not only are they stealing their treasury bonds in the form of sanctions, but they're stealing people's private holdings as well. So, this is very dangerous for the U.S. dollar. I've been saying this for years now. This game that America is playing with sanctions is not going to end well.
Yes, well, we have seen the U.S. consistently try to weaponize, and they have weaponized the currency. But now it's a different game out there because we have this new multipolar geopolitical reality unfolding. And, we've seen meetings between Putin and Xi Jinping. We've seen, a growing, stronger relationship between all of the BRICS countries. How do you think all this is going to play out?
Well, you know what happens when you're that bully in the schoolyard? Pretty soon, nobody wants to hang out with you because you're the bully in the schoolyard. And that's exactly what America is. They're the bully. And anybody that hangs out with America knows that they're going to be subject to bullying at some point. Who wants that? Right? So, look, Russia has been pushing for Africa to be more self-sufficient, to make more money on their own natural resources. The United States has been stealing from Africa for years and years. And not just Africa. They've been stealing from all around the world. They've been raping and pillaging their natural resources. That's the reason for the whole thing in Syria. I don't know if you know or not, but when al-Assad came into power, Bashir, the United States came to him and said, you know what? We want your oil and gas, but we're only going to pay you 20%. And he said, no, you're not. And they said, well, we'll see about that. And then they started this war in Syria. And the United States is famous for doing this. And everybody sees it. Everybody except for Europe. Okay. But they are famous for doing it. They've been doing it, since World War II. And the people around the world aren't going to stand for it. America is like 1% of the population, or maybe 4% of the population. It's a very low percentage of the population. And nobody wants it. Why should America be stealing from everybody?
Well, this aggressive stance that they take with the dollar, the way they weaponize it, it has really resulted in the U.S. dollars foundation beginning to crumble, as we've seen. Because look at what's going on with Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar, the way that they're now going to start accepting other currencies instead of propping up the U.S. dollar, which was always the deal since the 1970s. When Nixon initiated the dollar as the petrodollar, taking the United States off the gold standard. Things are changing now, right?
Yeah, they are. So, Russia and China, they've been hoarding copious amounts of gold. The United States, they have a lot of gold, but they can't afford to switch to a gold-backed currency. Because if they try to say that the dollar is related to gold, either you shoot up the price of gold, or you drastically devalue the dollar. So what's it going to be? They can't do it.
Just to go back to some of this discussion we had on law, we're not hearing as much about it in the news cycle right now, but that arrest warrant issued by I think it's the International Criminal Court for Putin remains out. How is that viewed over in Russia? Is that being taken very seriously at all?
No, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And everybody knows the sham that it is. I mean, because if the International Criminal Court was truly unbiased and objective, then, well, Biden would be in prison, Obama would be in prison, all the Bushes would be in prison. It's a joke. It's a joke. They are doing the bidding, not just the ICC, but all these other Western organizations, groups of Western nations are doing the bidding of their American master.
Yes. The United States is not a member of the ICC, actually, and either is Russia. So
it's a joke.
This arrest warrant is it really has no force or effect in my view. Is that your assessment as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's ludicrous. The hypocrisy of America pushing for this warrant when America won't even be a part of the ICC, when they have exempted themselves because, and this is a big because if they didn't exempt themselves, they would be guilty on so many different levels of international crime. So they have to exempt themselves, but for them to push for this warrant for Vladimir Putin, it's I've never seen any bigger hypocrisy in my life.
Yeah, well, as far as the U.S. is concerned, all you have to do is look back at Iraq and the claim of weapons of mass destruction, and then what resulted from that lie, which is clearly a lie.
It absolutely is a lie, and I like how they say that either it was misleading. What are these buzzwords that they use? Well, it was misleading info, or it was bad intel. No, it was freaking lies. It was lies.
Yeah, and I guess we're seeing more evidence of that now with these documents again, just being exposing a lot of those lies.
Yeah.
And and most of the mainstream media, with the exception, I think, of maybe Tucker Carlson and Mr. Greenwald, those are the two guys in the last week or so who have really drawn some attention to this, and yourself. So
yeah,
I'm not exactly where that leaves us. Where do you see the conflict in Ukraine going in the near future? Do you have any thoughts to share with us on that front?
It's really difficult to say. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. I know what's happening there now, and that is Ukraine is getting the floor wiped. Whether or not the United States keeps up this charade and keeps sending money and weapons to Ukraine, I don't know, but eventually there's nobody going to be around to use the weapons. The money that they're sending is being pillaged by their politicians, being pillaged by U.S. politicians, no less. So I don't know where it's going to go. I'm hoping that, there was some talk about Xi Jinping having talks with Zelensky. I'm hoping Zelensky can understand that the U.S. is not his friend, although he's made hundreds of billions of dollars from the U.S. But, I hope he understands that if it continues, he is not going to survive because the U.S. will not let him survive. His only chance for his own personal survival is coming to some agreement with with China and Russia.
And we've seen that maybe China is the best hope Ukraine has, because China has emerged on the world stage as the new global peacemaker.
Yeah. So it's very ironic that the United States, we are the, we used to have people like Reagan, right? We used to be the statesmen of the world. The Russians and the Chinese, they're very cool. They don't rush. They take their time. They are very statesmanlike. And you don't see that from American politicians anymore. And it's a damn shame, because the closest we had to a statesman in the last 20 years, well, since Ronald Reagan, was Trump. And yeah, Trump was a bit petulant, okay? And he liked to tweet, but if you ask me, the whole tweeting thing with Trump, it was really a good psychological operation. And he was really good at it. But he was always a gentleman to anybody that he met with, right? He never took anything personally. He was always a gentleman to Xi Jinping. He was a gentleman to Putin. He was a gentleman to Kim Jong-il. Yeah.
And he went to North Korea. I mean, that was historic.
Absolutely. And because he's a gentleman, you have his detractors saying, "Oh, he's doing their bidding." No, it's good statesmanship. You don't get emotional during negotiations. You don't act like a child. You don't throw hissy fits. You don't demonize people like Biden demonized the Saudis, calling them the pariah of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look how that turned out for America. Right?
Yeah, well, he went to visit and got a fist bump instead of a formal greeting.
Yeah, well, the fist bump was secretly a middle finger from the Saudis.
Exactly.
But look, every country has its own politics. They have their own view of of how things should work in their world. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Russia has its own national interests. China has its own national interests. The United States has its own national interests. But when the United States starts stomping around the world, demanding that the others do the United States bidding the way they want it done, you know what it reminds me of, kind of? It reminds me of like the slave master who used to stomp around with the whip, beating the girls carrying the baskets. It's no different. The United States is the slave master of the world, and they are acting like it. And it's disgusting behavior on the part of the American government and these politicians who do not have any class or etiquette whatsoever.
Yes. Well, John, I appreciate you joining us on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Is there anything else you'd like to add or think that I might be missing this evening?
No. Well, I will tell you something. I got into a fight on the Moscow Metro the other day.
Okay.
Bear with me, and I'll get to my point. It was a guy. He was kind of a crazy guy, right? Like I don't know what his deal was, and he was acting like a lunatic, and he punched me. I punched him back several times, and I dragged him off the metro. Now, I'm not saying that Russia is a violent place. The violence here is far lower than you'll ever see in the United States. And until that incident, I have never witnessed a violent crime here in Russia. Never seen it anywhere. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when I took this Russian guy to the cops, this was a veteran, okay? If there was any animosity towards Americans whatsoever, they would have arrested me. They would have made a spectacle, say, look what this American did. He's in jail, and it didn't happen, right? The cops didn't know who I was. They had no idea. They, in fact, typical of all cops, they tried to get out of doing the police report. They didn't want to have anything to do with it because, well, that's just paperwork that they got to write up. I get that. I was a cop. I know how that works. But if there was really any animosity towards Americans, they would have taken me into jail and they would have made a spectacle out of it. It's not how it works. It's not what happens here. I've met numerous Americans that have come here. All of them have had a fantastic experience. In fact, Randy Credo, have you ever heard of him?
No.
He's an American talk show host. He was, I don't know if he was a Democrat. He kind of reminds me of a Bill Maher. And he went to the Donbass for himself. He went for 5 days. And when he came back, he was all shook up because he really didn't expect the reality of what was happening there. He was sleeping in hotels in the middle of the city of Donetsk with the Ukrainians bombing all around him. It really gave him a bad fright. He came back kind of a basket case. Everybody treated him very well, and I'll send you his contact information. He might be a very interesting guy for you to interview.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him. Yeah.
Because this is a guy, he's an older guy. He used to do Ronald Reagan impersonations, I think on the Johnny Carson show or one of these talk shows. He's an old school, I think maybe Democrat, who's smart enough to realize that the American government is lying, and he came and he saw it for himself.
Interesting. Well, I'd love to make contact with him. So if you can help put that together, I'd absolutely welcome him on the show too, to get his perspective. Yeah. Well, John, thank you very much for joining us again. It's again always a pleasure, and
you too.
Look forward to having you on again in the very near future.
All right. Hey, take it easy, Rick.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
And again, thank you to John Mark Dougan for joining us on the program tonight. If you're inclined to support the channel, you can donate at freedomreporters.com. That takes you straight to the PayPal donation page. That's one of the only ways you can support the channel now that we're demonetized. You can also donate at maverickdonations.com, which takes you to the Give, Send, Go donation page. Please also like, share, subscribe. That helps us out a lot. I don't know where this whole YouTube thing is going. Seems to be going south pretty quickly. That's why we need people to subscribe over on Rumble. That's becoming our main place of residence, I think. At least it's functional. And we're still on YouTube. They just demonetized us completely. So we will see if we ever get that back, but I don't think so. It looks like it's a permanent thing. And as I said before, they took away 2 of our channels. So their business model is to tell everybody to screw off, which means pretty soon everybody will, all you'll be left with on YouTube will be cat videos. It's just a matter of time. And the federal government will accelerate the process with Bill C-11. Brother. Anyway, that's where we're at with YouTube. That gets us tonight to 8:57 p.m. I did notice that, let me just check one thing here. Yes, Rebecca Johnson, thank you so much. I see that you did donate on the PayPal page. Thank you. Truly, truly appreciate the support. As you know, it's needed now more than ever because we do have stuff to pay for here, including that phone system, which we are not going to get to tonight because it is now 9 p.m. Well, 8:58 coming up on 9 p.m., which will bring us to the conclusion of this broadcast day here on the Maverick News Channel. But I will return tomorrow evening, same channel, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Mavericks. I will catch you all then on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.